I'm Raffaele Rochila and I'm an extra virgin olive oil producer. We are in Apulia, in the province of Taranto, Castellaneta, at Le Grotte farm. I'm going to show you the different stages of extra virgin olive oil production, from the olive harvest to the bottling process. But first I'd like to say a couple of words about this farm, and in particular these olive trees behind me, which are hundreds of years old. This area has a very long history and is an important archaeological zone. The stones which I'm sitting on were mined in the 8th century BC by a community of Greek origin called the Peociti. Afterwards, in the 7th century, with the founding of Taranto by the Spartans, this area became a large Greek community, which was then followed by the construction of a Roman villa. Frederick II donated this piece of land around the year 1000 to the Benedictine monastery of Cava dei Tirreni, which produced olive oil. Since then, this land has always been used to produce olive oil. The proof of what I've just said, other than these rocks, is in the olive trees which were probably planted in the 1400s by the Benedictine monks. In fact, olive trees can live 800 or 900 years, and some even live as long as 1200 years. Olive trees are typical to the Mediterranean basin and are a plant that through the millennium has always been considered sacred, from the Phoenicians to the Egyptians and ancient Greeks. In fact, it was written in the Athenian constitution that anyone who uprooted an olive tree would be sentenced to death. An interesting characteristic of olive trees, and of these trees in particular, is that through the centuries their internal tissue degenerates and they tend to divide into two parts, like this tree here. Until recently, when this happened, one of two parts was cut down and used as firewood. So, ironically, the older trees tend to be smaller than the younger ones. Now that these trees have become part of the Apulian regions and Italy's patrimony, it's illegal to cut down the smaller half of the tree and burn it. These ancient olive trees are living monuments, living sculptures, and I like to think of myself as their custodian and not the owner of this farm and these trees, just a keeper. They were here before me and they'll be here when I'm gone. As you can see behind me, we harvest the olives by hand using ladders. It's December and we're in the midst of the olive harvest. In a little while we'll go see how olives are harvested in other parts of the farm and with other techniques and methods. I'm now going to describe the first step in obtaining extra virgin olive oil. The first phase is the olive harvest, which is in this case, and with this type of tree, is done by placing nets under the trees where we are working and using so-called compressed air combs, which are attached to a compressor mounted on a machine made specifically for this purpose. These combs are used by workers to shake the leaves and olives so that they fall into the net. The next step is to collect the olives and put them in small crates, after which then put into large containers. The crates and containers need to be aired out before the next phase can begin. The harvest begins after All Saints' Day. It used to continue until March, but usually we are able to finish by Christmas or even before. This thanks to machines which speed up the harvesting process. The regulations guiding the production of extra virgin olive oil require that farmers take specific precautions. For example, as you saw earlier, we store the olives after they've been harvested in crates, which are open on the sides because they tend to get bruised when they fall into the nets and begin to ferment immediately. If we place these olives inside a closed sack, this will cause the temperatures to rise, which in turn would speed up the fermentation process, which in the end would damage the quality oil produced. On the other hand, by placing the olives in these open crates, the cool ambient temperature slows the fermentation process, which is essential if you want to obtain a high-quality olive oil. Once the olives are placed in the containers, they are cleaned for first time to remove any leaves and twigs. This will be followed by a second cleaning directly in the oil mill. From this moment to the final phase of milling, which is when the oil comes out, not more than 8 hours can pass. Well, we have spent an entire day together. You have learned a bit about the history of this farm, the history of olives, and you've seen the first steps in the process which leads to the creation of olive oil, that is the harvest. In the olive mill, what happens? The olives are cleaned for a second time, after which comes the so-called destoning. Sometimes during the harvest some stones or pieces of dirt are mixed in with the olives, so it's important to rinse them with the running water. Once they've been washed, the olives are placed in an olive mill, and now the olive pressing process can begin in earnest. The olives are ground briefly, after which they pass into a kneader, which they'll stay for 2 hours. At this point, the olive paste is placed in a decanter. The function of the decanter is to separate the water from the oil and olive residues. It's important to note all of these need to happen at temperature below 27 degrees Celsius. It's the classic cold pressing technique. If you work at higher temperatures, you obtain oil, but it's of low quality. The oil and water then pass through the centrifuge to divide out any water that's in emulsion with the oil and any oil that's in emulsion with the water. At this point, the oil is ready and is placed in stainless steel containers where it's stored. It's important to stress that all production happens in stainless steel containers, which are cleaned periodically in compliance with the standards set by the Europe for the production of extra virgin olive oil. After storage, we have bottling. This is the final product. It's my oil, Le Grotte di Sileno. The name embodies the culture and tradition of this land and this farm. Sileno was a satyr who was venerated in these parts alongside Athena, the goddess who, according to mythology, gave olive trees to men. The typical characteristics of this oil are those you would expect from olives farmed in the soils and worked according to Europe regulations. It has a very low acidity level and therefore tends to exalt scents and flavors.